Okay, here we are. 81 episodes. 81
We,
weeks. 81 weeks of this. I love it.
I know, we keep coming back for more.
Yeah, it's I'm not gonna lie. I'm a little impressed with myself and with all the co-hosts being able to participate as
And you can pat
consistently as we
yourself
have.
on,
Yeah.
you can pat yourself on the back every now and then. And this is awesome. You're doing great.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah, I'm. It's been it's been a great summer work wise for me. Um, as we were talking a little bit before the show, yeah, like the actor strike, the writer strike from 2023 really did its well. The writer strike more so than the actor strike, but it really did purge out a lot of the useless stuff going on in the
Hmm.
industry.
Hmm.
Um, and it's starting to balance out like productions, the amount of things that are being produced, the amount of stuff that's being released, and what's fantastic for me is that people are responding to my emails, they're answering my calls, or they're calling me again, which is really nice. It's really nice. And the other part too is I've had a number of phone calls where I get the deals I used to get like 6 7 years ago, and in those days, I had just gotten my publishing job at the time, so I'd
Hmm.
always be like, no, you're gonna have to give me a little bit more, either money or some more solidified credit or something, and then they'd kind of walk it back a little bit. Um, Nowadays, I'm doing it again, and they're like remembering, prior to the pandemic, prior to all the political hoopla, it's like, oh, you're still doing that. You don't really need this job. It's like, I would love to help you, but you got to make it a little sweeter for me. so and and so I'll get a couple of no's, but then after a week or so, they'll call back and be like, "Okay, let's negotiate again." I'm like, "All right, cool." So yeah, last this summer's been pretty good. Last couple weeks have been crazy. I still think it's a miracle I'm able to get my Saturday evenings to still do the show. Almost didn't today. So I messaged you earlier. I had to run down into the
Right,
city because we
right.
lost the production I'm on lost a location because of a festival that's going on. So we had to find a new one like really fast.
Yeah, and I'm standing in for somebody this week too. And whoever it is, I hope your week goes well. But I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here, especially for this script too. It was either you or the original host who he had the same issue I had last week, where his internet just went out in his neighborhood. And
Uh,
mine fortunately came back like literally at the at the last impossible moment to do it. Um, so that was a relief, but unfortunately, yeah, his is still down. But he'll be back again, and it's no end of the world stuff. But it was him and you. I'm like, yeah, Daga would like this. This other guy would like this. He reached out a little earlier first to be like, yeah, let's do it. And then as soon as he told me like, yeah, his internet's done, I'm like, okay, I know exactly what to do. Boom. So I hit up you and I hit up one other guy just in case you weren't able to do it. But you said you're in, and I'm so happy because we have a fun script to discuss today.
I do.
But otherwise, how are you doing, sir? I'm happy you're here.
Yeah, no, I'm glad I'm here too. A lot of people know, and I've mentioned it on my channel. My health is getting a little bit more dicey, but I'm very excited to be here because, yeah, I appreciate it when you hit me up for these because I can't tell you how fun this really is. It's a highlight for me. So no, I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, these are the types of stuff. I mean, I still do these types of conversations just on my own time whenever I bump into a colleague and a script comes up that we've heard, or maybe even a script that they've heard about and I haven't heard yet, and they're pitching it to me. And we have this fun little conversation back and forth, and that's what I like about this show is that I get to kind of do that outside of the general industry. Like I've got you as a writer, I've got some other people as fans, I got some other guests as writers, and we get a nice little mixed point of view on things, and it really kind of gives me some interesting angles to look at stories from that I otherwise don't normally get to do, and that's why I like having all you guys participating whenever you can on the show.
Yeah, no, appreciate it very much.
Well, with that being said, it seems like all of our audio out there is good. Nobody Nobody could has said any issues. So with that being said, let's get on with the show. Welcome to
All right.
Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs discussing scripts both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week is a Dig Outlaw.
Hello.
Hello, sir. Okay, so this week, we are reviewing this screenplay called Fragments. So this came in 25th place on the 2024 blacklist with 16 votes. It's written by Jake Moses, and the logline for Fragments is: after a tragic accident, a young nurse finds herself blacklisted and out of work until she's approached by a detective with a unique job offer: become the caretaker for a murder suspect who may be faking his Alzheimer's diagnosis. Adega, please share with us the synopsis for Fragments.
Leah Solis, a desperate dementia nurse, takes a covert job to surveil Frank Morris. Editor. Posing as his caregiver, she plants cameras in his eerie home, guided by neighbor Maeve. As Leah uncovers chilling clues, a sinister secret ensnares her in a deadly trap, her brain on the edge.
Oh, yeah, okay. So, I will say, I don't know about you, Adega, but I will say this opening was charming, beautiful, and tragic all at the same time.
Right, right. There is, it was really interesting because I have dealt with, a lot of you know that I was a retired doctor. I have dealt with various stages of dementia. Not that often because it wasn't my profession to deal with dementia, but being a doctor, you run into these people. And also, I dealt with people that ran facilities that took care of these people. And it was interesting because the person did their homework.
Mm-hmm.
The writer really did his homework on how dementia works. Maybe he has a family member, or some of these facilities. The first thing you learn about these facilities is that you never ever trust a dementia patient in the home with an unlocked door, an unlocked window, anything. And as soon as she said she wanted to hear the crickets, it sounded just to me like one of these old ploys. Here's the setting. Sorry, I'm going to jump ahead because
Sure, go right ahead. Yeah, please.
this script was right up my alley. You said it was tragic and beautiful. And the beautiful part of it was you have this nurse, and to find a nurse that actually cares is a wonderful thing. You're going to get about 50% of them. But to the extent that Leah was for Rose was really impressive. You're talking about friendship, doing their nails together, helping her go to bed, the whole thing. It made for a really pretty, beautiful scene, helping her go up the stairs to her room, everything. And then you could see the dementia sitting in with this lady saying that, her husband's out for the evening. He's coming home late, probably stuck in traffic, and it's okay that she goes to sleep now. So she lays in bed and she says, but one thing my husband and I like to do is listen to the crickets. And knowing how dementia patients work, they will do sly things. Like I've seen them, or I've heard stories from people that actually work with them, where they'll have inner courtyards, high walls, no windows, and they'll tag team to where they move benches over so they can climb the walls and sneak out.
Mm-hmm.
And when this lady said, I want to hear the crickets, it sounded very suspicious to me. And Leah, being maybe a little bit naive, but it was presented very, very well. Totally believable. She left the door or the window open so Rose can hear the crickets. And that set alarms off in me. It wasn't meant to set alarms off, I think, on anybody that was paying attention to the story, but someone who deals in healthcare or dementia care, they're going to know that was a big mistake. So Leah goes downstairs. She's outside talking on the phone. And then Rose does a face plant out the window. And that's where we start. And like you said, it was a beautiful relationship all set up.
Mm-hmm.
And for some healthcare professional to make such a dramatic mistake like that, one, that's what you have malpractice for. But when it's an obvious mistake like that, you're in trouble. And that sets up for anyone who knows Leah is now in trouble.
Oh yeah.
Everything about her profession, about her finances, everything is now going to be in jeopardy because it was even with an usually when you go to court
Hmm.
and you're dealing with some type of tragedy or accident or what have you when it comes to health course, and this is in the United States, Canada's probably very similar. But when you go to court, they will measure the person's value based on their age and how much they can produce. So if it was a child who did it or someone up into their early 20s, the value of that person would be worth far more than an elderly person. Say if you're getting some type of settlement, you're talking multi-millions for a child, where someone who's a senior, maybe a couple 100,000 or what have you. But regardless, the record that Leah has to put up with, now it's going to be in the database that she was a caregiver and she has lawsuits and has been fired and various different things that go against her license.
Yep.
So yeah, this was a big deal.
It was a big deal because, I mean, she's a very empathetic character. So Leah's
Right.
empathetic, and she opens up the window, but she keeps the screen door locked, and she's sitting there just waiting for Rose to doze off. And you get this idea that as soon as Rose falls asleep, she's going to close that window, lock it, and then head down to her room or what have you. But then the dog shows up, wanting to go out, and she
Right.
gets distracted with the dog and completely forgets to close that window. And that's where the conflict comes in, because as she's taking care of the dog, it's doing its business outside. Like, she's giving the dog a proper walk. She's not just sending it out to the backyard, which is clearly part of the estate that she's in. She's taking the
Yeah, you have
dog
to
out and
forgive
giving
me.
him
I
a walk. Yeah.
She had used the phone so much and I had forgotten about the dog. So, but that was the case. So you're right.
Yeah. And I know this all too well too, because before I had my first part-time job that I had in the evenings outside of working for like Blockbuster Video during high school, is I worked for a hospital, because my mom and my aunt and other relatives all work for hospitals. So I got a chance to get a part-time job in the evenings to work there. And one part of the hospital had a continuing care center, and on the fourth floor was the dementia ward. And the dementia ward had windows that could not open, and it was
Right.
like 4-inch thick glass. Like, you couldn't break through it no matter you want. And every time I'd be working there, you had to work in groups. So you had to work in group of threes, especially if you were students working there. And the reason being is that despite patients with dementia kind of like behaving docile, they're actually just storing up their energy, because the moment they see a chance to get out, they will sprint or leap from their wheelchair and, like an athletic sprinter, make it across a 100-meter hall in under like 12 seconds.
Yep.
And you have to be quick. And I've worked there where I've had people who didn't have teeth, so they just had gums biting on you, and you'd think it would hurt less because it's gums, but it doesn't. It hurts more. It just doesn't break the skin as easily.
Right.
And then you have some that are just, they have their moments where they're so easily irritated, and the reason they're easily irritated is because they are hyper aware that something's not right, and as soon as something doesn't make sense that used to make sense for them, they get really upset, because there's a fear going through their minds that something's wrong. And it's essentially like pseudo gaslighting, where nobody on the outside of them is doing anything different or what have you, but the way that they're processing information doesn't connect all the way through, and then they get frustrated and terrified, and then quick to anger. And this script
Right.
really captures those types of situations, which I thought was like fantastic.
Yeah, in a lot of cases too, which was without him saying it, he did it by showing. Oftentimes, especially with Alzheimer's, but a lot of different types of dementia. There's some that don't, but a lot of them, the person is going to respond, act kind of like you were saying, where they get frustrated, similar to someone who's 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah.
But they have memory bits here and there trying to have them fit to a 3 or 4 year old mentality, and it does cause them to act irrationally. And like you said, sprinting, magnitudes of energy just suddenly burst out of them. So yeah, it's accurate.
It is, and I appreciated that. And the other part too is, I like the suspense of this opening act because it seems just really run of the mill. Okay, so Leah's out there. She's with the dog. The dog, marks a tree, then, voids its bowels. She picks it up. She's heading back to the house. She unlocks the door, and all of a sudden there's something red just drops right from behind her. And you hear a thump. And Leia just goes deathly cold and slowly turns around, and she's in utter shock. She can't move. And you feel through the words on the page, you feel that Leia has legitimately lost like someone she genuinely cares about, and isn't even really thinking about her future at this point. It's just like, oh my gosh, this person is gone. and then
patients that you care about stick with you.
Yeah.
And the following days and some of the follow-up that they have where she doesn't have enough money to buy food. Her card gets rejected for even a simple sandwich. She has to sell her car for money. All of that is very, very real for someone in a healthcare, because a nurse, in most cases, they are going to make a fairly good living. And, but, a lot of them are going to have student loans, just like it presented with her. She has bills that are going to pile up. And you could start to feel the crunch. And it was done very practically. Again, like where she's thinking, well, she has to go to a convenience store to buy a sandwich instead of a sit-down restaurant. You already could sense, well, there's problems there with her finances already. And then the card gets rejected, and she ends up eating cereal at home. And that was something I could feel.
Yeah.
It was really painted very well.
And you empathize with her. And then her interview with the hiring manager to a nursing home that clearly pays significantly less than what she worked at before, but she's desperate. But again, the hiring manager hadn't done their due diligence before booking her for the interview. And then all of a sudden, while she's interviewing Leia, decides to start looking into her, and then realizes, you've got a record here that pretty much says I can't trust you. and you feel very sorry for Leah, because she has worked her whole life to do this. She's clearly very good at her job, aside from this one mistake. And now she is in a bind where she has to sell her car for significantly less than what it's worth, just to cover a student loan debt, and also keep her financed until she can find another job. She's not qualified really to do anything else, because we don't see her trying to apply to being a waiter or any type of other service industry that just needs a body. So she also has a passion for it. She wants to be doing what she loves, and she's very broken when we follow up with her afterwards. And it's not until she gets a phone call from the police by the detective that met her while during the investigation of her previous client's death that he offers her an opportunity. And he does so in a very peculiar way, a way that's really suspicious, where he just says, I have some questions for you. Could you come down by the station at this time? And in a lot of cases, if the police are calling you and asking you to come down by the station, it's a higher chance that they have something on you and they want to arrest you, and they just want to make it nice and easy. So in this part here, I'm wondering, okay, is she going to be arrested for something? Is there something that we didn't know? What's going to be the twist? Is the first act twist? And the first act twist is that this detective that has contacted her, this detective Campbell, has another case that he's investigating, and he requires Leia's skills as a nurse and caregiver to help solve a crime. And it's very suspicious, this setup here. For starters, Detective Campbell is outside of the police station when he meets Leia, and he says, I was just about to grab some coffee, walk with me. And they end up going to a Starbucks, and he lays out everything that he's saying. There's this guy named Frank Morris. He's 70 years old. There's a woman that was his in-home caregiver. She's gone missing. We can't find the body. All of our surveillance that we were able to subpoena suggests that she never left the neighborhood, and we searched the house and we found a couple of clues, but they're not strong enough to warrant any further investigation. And I think that Frank is pretending to be senile and suffering from various forms of dementia in order to escape further investigation and possible prosecution. So I want to hire you for 30 grand for 3 days to monitor him and determine if he's faking or not.
Yeah,
And
she was going to turn him down because he said 30 grand, and she thought, well, that's less than what I make in a year. That's not a good job. And he goes, no, this is for 3 days, not a year.
yeah, and she's like, well, that I mean, he's even knows that will solve her financial problems for at least that year, easily.
Right.
But she's apprehensive, and he says, well, the one thing I can also do for you is that malpractice flag on your record, on your employment history. I can make that go away. And immediately, being someone who comes from a little bit of that background, I'm like, yeah, a police department can't do that.
Nope.
They can't
Nope.
exchange
No.
that.
Yeah. The only thing, it used to be the case, at least in the States, I don't know about how it is in other countries, but in the States, it used to be where you could move to another state and you'd have to go looking for the record.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it kind of travels with you. But there were some places where I knew where people lived where the doctors that showed up there were not real doctors. They shouldn't have been working anymore because of the mistakes they made, and they were able to get away with it because of a move. But that's not the case anymore.
Yeah. No, I mean, the best thing that a police department could do is they could coordinate with a medical bureau and a court and say that they wouldn't get rid of the malpractice, but they would qualify it with, this person has proven that they will not repeat this thing again. It is still required by people hiring them to vet them to confirm our things. They cooperated with an investigation, and their skills were of a pristine level to say they could do this, 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 this. It doesn't get rid of it, but it basically gives more information so that a company or an individual hiring them would see, oh, okay, so they made a mistake. They have spent X amount of time making up for that mistake. They have then spent X amount of time working with the authorities, proving that that mistake won't be repeated. Maybe I could entertain the idea of giving them a chance, but it doesn't get rid of you can't get rid of that from their record. And if someone can promise you that and they're able to do it, they are committing a huge a violation.
Yeah. No, that's completely against all the laws in the States, and I do believe most Western countries as well. That you can't expunge that at all.
No, it's there with you for all the time.
Yep.
But this is a very tempting offer for Leah, and she says, "Okay, I'll do it because I want to work in this industry again, and I need that money." So we hit the two situational flaws that Leah has in this story. And Campbell drives her out to this cabin in this kind of like small neighborhood out in the middle of Colorado. And the cabin is where Campbell will be held up. And one thing that I thought was kind of interesting is that he bought 2 coffees for him and Leah. And Leah takes a sip of hers and it has a bitter taste. And she's like, oh, something's wrong here. He's like, oh, that must be mine. And I'm immediately assuming, oh, there's some liquor in that.
Yep.
And that ends up becoming a quick payoff. But Campbell does the basic rundown with her. So Campbell has managed to get a legit email authorizing Leah to sub in for the existing caregiver that Frank Morris has hired since his previous one has disappeared. And so the agency is allowing the police to have Leah be the caregiver for the next 3 days to determine if Frank is truly suffering from dementia or faking it. And afterwards, Leah will leave, and then the real caregiver will come in. And
there's something on the car drive, too, besides the coffee. There was a little charm, a picture of the little girl hanging from his rearview mirror. Or I think it was the rearview mirror.
Yeah, it's from a rearview mirror.
Questions him about it. First unsolved case.
First unsolved case of a little girl back in '91 named Chloe Burke, and it was the first case he was assigned to. And he says it's the first case he's solved, but the way that he solved it is that he, he knows what happened to her, but he didn't find the body, so to speak.
Right, right, right. So
And
it wasn't really solved.
yeah, so I mean, I would say it's that's like one of those mostly solved things. It's
Right, and
not a
it
great
stuck
thing.
with him.
Yeah,
It stuck with him because he kept that picture, so he knew he wasn't. It was something that still haunted him.
exactly. It's like a 35-year-old case, not fully resolved, but enough to the point where it's been his driving force up until this point here. He then gives Leia, the Q branch talk. Okay, here's all your devices. This is what you need to do. This is the wire you're wearing. Um, these are how many rooms are in his house. These are the cameras you got to place discreetly there. Make sure that you get entrances to the rooms so that we can see who comes and who goes. And we will well, he says we'll, but it's like he'll be monitoring her because he's like only 2-minute walk away from the house that she'll be staying in. And so she basically has a ticking clock of 3 days to determine if this guy's legit or faking.
Yeah,
And
and for me, an odd thing when he said to place those listening or
cameras,
cameras,
yeah.
and then they wear the listening device. That to me was one of the more, and I don't know why, maybe it's just me, but it was accurate too for the story. It was one of the more tension building tools that the author used because you have a dementia patient who's going to be suspicious of everything.
Mm-hmm.
If he's a true dementia patient, or significantly far along, and you start placing or playing with bookshelves or different countertops or different things, maybe on top of the fridge or different stuff. To me, that seemed like, well, that's one of the biggest dangers that she was potentially getting into on the very first day. So that was that little device, but for me, it built a lot of tension.
It did, because if she moved anything significantly enough to place that camera, its likelihood of Frank's going to notice that goes up.
Right, because he's an absolute neat freak.
Yeah, everything is like when she goes to his front door, she sees that this place is immaculate, and then she can see the neighbor next door, who's done by Maeve. Her house is fairly normal looking, but it's not as pristine as Frank's. And Maeve is like putting together a bird feeder on Frank's property, and that's because nobody answers the door when she knocks. She actually just hears someone drilling around the corner. And she investigates, and then she meets Maeve, and we find out that Maeve's the next door neighbor, and she helps out Frank here and there, between nurses, so to speak. And she's really fairly likable, but she's like a very hands-on type of person. She's got carpentry skills. She's always working on something. But yeah, the writer did a good job giving Leah all the plausible reasons as to why she's here and not the original nurse hired. And I like the fact that they don't have Maeve give Leia the third degree on that. Basically, she's like, oh, I thought the nurse was named Anne or something. And Leia's like, well, I've got the email that says, she's like, whatever. Come on in. Just it felt more natural that way.
Yeah, it did. Except, and maybe it was for me, I took it as foreshadowing, but as soon as I met Maeve, she made me nervous.
Yeah.
I, I just, I think it's because maybe I've read too many stories or seen some things, um, and it's a general rule when I watch. My wife's really good at this too. When we watch detective stories or what have you, the culprit is usually introduced early, but then dismissed, and it builds from there. And I thought, okay, this is the introduction, and we'll find out as we go along. But yeah, she made me nervous right off the jump.
Yeah, I mean, she's it's weird. You see like a woman in her 40s, uh, I get the sense that she had like a denim shirt with the sleeves ripped off, and she's got like baggy pants. Just she has she has thick glasses, and she's wearing like mom jeans and wool sweater and stuff. But she feels kind of like she's a little burly and just making weird, like just working with power tools out in the middle of the day on stuff.
Yeah,
Like it
and the
just felt
fact
so
that
out of place, and that you wouldn't see. Oh, it's not a handyman or something. It's this single woman in her 40s with like jet black hair and glasses, and
and the fact that she was able to identify and know everything inside Frank's house, what
yeah.
his routines are, everything, and she's a neighbor. And there was a nurse there before. Um, it maybe it's because I lived in the Detroit area for too long, but I'm suspicious of everything. So that I was thinking, yeah, she's a little too familiar with the place.
I mean, I was for 2025. She's 100% too familiar for the place. If this was taking place in like the 80s or 90s when people were a bit more neighborly, I
Yeah,
could
that's
have bought
true.
into it because
That's
like
true.
that's the one thing that I remember that changed significantly when I was growing up as a kid is that my family would have the neighbors over all the time. And then when my neighbors like they moved away or they retired and the new people came in, we didn't invite anybody over. It's like and nobody and then that's where the distances start to happen. It's like, oh, so there that whole sense of like, neighborhood and community started to erode in the mid to late 90s, and now it's almost non-existent. Like even today, like I'll bump into my neighbor here and there and it's just a nice hi or something, and no small talk, no what's going on in the neighborhood. It's just nope, got to get back to work or to my family. I don't care about what's going on next door. Nobody's crossing onto my property. I'm not doing anything to infringe theirs. Not going to stir the pot. Go about my own business. That's more
Right.
how it is these days. But I think what the writer was doing here, and I think they did a pretty interesting job, is that they've established that Maeve is a care. It's like another caring person, but just not a professional caregiver, and that
Right.
she has some sort of history with Frank for a number of years, and that's why she knows what's going on. We also find out that she supplies groceries for Frank, so she buys some food so that he can take care of himself to a degree. And what was really cool is like when when Leia gets inside and she starts going through the house to try and meet Frank, and she meets Frank. One of the things she notices is that there's no dementia proofing in this house at all. Like everything is unlocked and everything is open, and there's all these things that Frank could get access to harm himself or others that is very exposed. And Leia is really concerned by this because even her predecessor should have taken care of this before she got here.
Exactly. Exactly. Even early onset of Alzheimer's, you start looking at where are potential places that they could trip.
Yeah.
Should doors be left open or should they be shut? All the different little things where you're gradually taking someone who's an older person, and one of the first things you're going to notice, well, they got a mentality about a 10-year-old. Well, what are you going to protect a 10-year-old from? Well, you're going to protect them from knives, electrocution, and that. And then as it goes on further, then you have to start locking things away. You have to start child-proofing everything. But in this case, it's adult-proofing because
Mm-hmm.
they have bills. But you're absolutely right that nothing was secure. That was unusual, to say the least.
I mean,
But
yeah.
then
But the thing is, it leaned into the suspicion that Campbell had about Frank maybe faking it.
yes,
So I thought that was really
yes.
cool.
And the way he was sitting at the computer, because that was one of the first introductions, was him sitting there playing solitaire at the computer the whole time. Well, um, that takes a little bit of disbelief to think that he's just playing solitaire the whole time. Someone is his with dementia, they're going to start. In my family, my wife's stepfather, is going through it. And so we've had to more directly deal with this. And everything from just simple paper. or stuff that comes in the mail, various different things you have to lock down because they could make some really serious errors or do harm to themselves or to others, to
Hmm.
bank accounts, changing things. And for him to be sitting in front of a computer like that, I thought, well, that's um, something
That
that
better
needs to
not be. I
change.
mean, I'm looking at thinking that better not be connected to the internet.
Right,
Just off of that.
right,
Uh,
right.
the other part too. I mean, this might be very different in I'd say 30 years or so. But a man who's 70 in 2025, I think they'd be more playing physical solitaire with a deck of cards than they would be on a computer, just out of habit. Um,
Yeah,
but like I would say 20 years from now, it's going to be a computer or a PlayStation or something,
right.
but just for generations, because again, if that means they'd be 50 at year 2000, that means that they would have been 25 in the 70s, 70s and 80s. So pre, their peak adulthood area of their interest in what they would do was prior to the computer age. So I doubt that we'd be seeing them much. Even some of the people I know that are in their late 60s and early 70s, unless they were hardcore geeks, like my buddy Paul Chato, they're reading physical books, they're playing cards, properly. They're doing actual like activities. They're not going near technology. Um, and,
It all depends. My parents have passed away. They were both greatest gen. My
mm-hmm,
mom was really computer savvy, and she would play cards or different games on the computer, where my dad would grab a book and have something in his hand. So
mm-hmm.
it depends, but the general tendency, I think you're correct.
Oh yeah, it's definitely case by case. But I mean, for various generations, especially those in senior citizens in this particular time period, it's more likely that they'll gravitate towards physical stuff than they will technology. But
Plus, the previous nurse should have provided that. It would have been,
mhm.
like a checkerboard or something tangible to help exercise dexterity in their mind, not just click, 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 click,
Yeah,
click.
the pointing and
You know,
clicking is not the same as actually
right.
physically interacting with something, which is something I learned when I was working at the hospital, because I'd be like, oh, can't we just like this again would be year 2000 Minecraft. I remember was a big thing for my parents to play. I don't even know how to play that game, but I would ask them like, why don't we just have them play Minecraft? And they said no, they need more physical activity. Moving the mouse and clicking is very passive, but if you can get them to play chess or play cornhole, like throwing the sandbags around,
Right.
or something,
Right.
that's better for their physical activity because it uses more of their body and they're not just sitting
Hmm.
down in one position. Um, and also, the funny part is that the chess and checker games went by so much faster when they played with another person than they would ever do it with a computer. Uh, so so yeah, like that was one of the things I thought was interesting is that he's like hunched over, he's at the computer, he barely registers anybody, um, and then then basically Leia kind of settles in for everything, starts asking what's he want to do, what does he want to eat. He's kind of uh, he's very apprehensive and distant from her,
Hmm.
and but he's like, oh yeah, you're okay, you're the new girl, and she wants to play a game with him, and this game is basically like how much do you remember. And so she asks him the basic questions like, okay, um, uh, gosh, I'm trying to think, what is it? Right, what's my name? Like she asked him, like, what's my name? Who am I? Do you remember who I am? He's like, oh, you must be the daughter of the woman that was here. She's like, you mean Maeve? He's like, that's right, Maeve's daughter. And she's like, well, no, I'm your nurse. And he's like, oh, and your name is Maeve? And she's like, I'm Leah, but that was a good guess. You remembered the name. You remembered a name. And she's just kind of going through the basic stuff of like, do you know the town that you're in? Do you know, uh, do you know, does this phrase Manitou Springs sound familiar? What's your name? Do you have a middle name? What is that? And Frank struggles with his middle name. And this is where I was like, oh, this guy really did his research because he really conveyed how a person suffering from dementia is trying to remember something that they know, like just
Right.
reflexively, but can't get it out for whatever reason.
Right. And I mentioned my parents had passed, and my dad, did quick, and it took him real quick. It was with called a spongiform encephalitis. Basically, his brain got little holes, little vascular holes all throughout it. And when you would talk to him, it reminded me of this because he would see you, know who you were, but the connection between the word and the person and the description of the person was severed. So someone would say, well, who's this? And he said, well, that's my son. Do you remember his name? No. So this fit. What's your name? Oh, this is my name, but can't remember the middle name. So not only did the character present it well, but
Oh,
the author did really good.
oh yeah, and I mean, I really liked how he lost his temper, and then he immediately says, "Oh, forgive me, I didn't mean to raise my voice. I just got excited."
Very
That's all.
typical.
Very typical. It's that frustration, that fear, and then it's basically going through the 5 stages of grief with every thought action. It's really like messed up, and I'm terrified to one day for myself to be so old that I'm in that situation and scaring the people around me that I love. But the thing is, like, Leia handles it really well. It's like she's gone through this a million times before, even though she's only really had like one type of part-time nursing job doing this stuff, and then her next patient was a full-time live-in, and now she's with
That was
this
something
guy.
that we didn't get into either, is we didn't know she had worked at the dementia place, or at least if they told us, I don't remember. But she had obviously had skills because you could see the way she dealt with Rose at the very beginning. I mean, she made the one mistake, but so sitting down and being comfortable dealing with another mental patient, obviously, for me, in my mind, made sense. She knew what she was doing. She had training. It's all coming back to her. This is what she liked to do.
And so, like, Frank remembers his middle name is Edward, and of course he defends himself by saying, "You just didn't let me finish." and Leia just cracks a faint smile, and she just registers him as, like, pretty authentic for this. She sort of tucks Frank in and says, "Okay, I'm gonna be in my room, so if you need anything, just knock on the door." And when she leaves, she actually locks Frank in his room because she's still a little unnerved. And then
Oh yeah, you just had a cop that said, "Hey, you're going to go into this house, and it's probably a killer, and you're going to sleep in his house." So yeah, locking his door would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Now she gets an alert on her phone that someone has just deposited 10 grand in US dollars to her account, and then she tries to pay her student debt payment through a mobile device, but it says you have to go on a laptop or something. So she heads over to Frank's office and boots up the computer, and she starts to type in on the search engine the school, the Lend edu address, and then she notices that a line of purple text appears below the search bar briefly, then vanishes, and she decides to delete the characters one by one until the old search pulls up, and it ends up saying Leah Solis, Colorado Springs, and Leah realizes that Frank was researching her, and
Right.
and she immediately texts Campbell saying that she found something, shuts off the computer, peeks out of the office looking to see if Frank has moved anywhere or not, and then she just leaves the house, and we get this beautiful described shot where Frank is at his bedroom window and he's wide awake, standing behind the glass, eyes tracking Leah as she runs off into the distance towards Campbell's house. And this is where Leah is like, "We've got some issues here, because I only sent my full name to him once, and he was able to remember that to search who I am and on the internet." And Campbell is like, "Okay, is that something that can't happen?" She's like, "It's highly unlikely." And he's like, "Well, highly unlikely is still reasonable doubt, so it's not enough for us to end here. We got to keep going back and get more." And Leia doesn't want to go back at all. she has a lot of doubts, and Frank is not this feeble-looking 70-year-old man. He actually is kind of he's got like old man strength. He's got meaty hands. He's burly. You could tell that he used to be working and in labor of some kind, and even though he's old and suffering from dementia, he's not weak in the muscle or bones type of area.
Old man strength is a real thing.
Yeah.
Just going back to that, where she left the house with him standing there, and then she going in to talk with the cop. I pictured in my mind what that would look like in a movie, and I think in a lot of, if it was done right, that could be one heck of an intense moment.
Yeah.
Just going out of the house with him looking out the window. That kind of a shot to me, I think, would be one of the ones that really, really can make a movie if it's done right. It was written really well, but you get the right. You know this business better than I do, but in my mind, that seems like here we got massive tension. She's being watched, she's being researched, and now she's scared, and the cop says, "Go back."
Oh yeah, I mean it's like something out of Psycho, Norman Bates, or the mother in the window, the silhouette in the window, like staring out, and you're
Right.
like getting that creep. Like that's the vibe that I kind of got when she was leaving the house. And for Campbell, we see that he's taking some pills and he's drinking some alcohol, and he's like completely glued to the laptop watching all the camera feeds. But he is very much saying like we need to we need to be able to get evidence that removes all doubt that he's involved.
Mm-hmm.
And Leah's like, nope, just please take me home. And he says, okay, but this is what happens. I'm not paying you for the rest of the days, and you're never going to get your life back after this because I'm not going to get rid of that medical malpractice on your record. So you either tough it out for the next 2 days, get what we need if it's there, and you get $20,000 more. So you complete the rest of the 30, and I will get rid of the issue on your record. And so Leah is basically like has no other options here. Either go back to struggling. I mean, the 10 grand is useful, but that's going to put her right back in the position where she was at the start of the film, or start of the story. Only a couple months from now. So it's really just delaying the inevitable. And
there's a little incidental thing here, and I don't know if the author intended it. If he did, he's brilliant. If not, it's kind of a common sense thing. And without doing too much heavy foreshadowing or explaining before we get to it, but anytime, and there's a physiological, there is a actual researched over and over again truth to when you have that spooked feeling, you gotta listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
And she was talked out of it by the cop.
Yeah.
And that to me was like, yeah, that's really, I like that. If you guys haven't figured it out, the author here, he wrote in a way that I really like, and he didn't make any spelling errors. And there's something coming up later too. The way he did the text, I thought, at least in the script, was brilliant. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no. I mean, the way that he structured this is that since the story begins, every 20 pages is about a day in Leia's life, and he keeps it nice and tight because this is only like a 95-page script. It's really tight.
There's hard changes and emotions almost every other page.
Yeah, there are. It's so good because even after like Leah reluctantly decides to go back, everything is kind of good. She lies asleep in bed. She wakes up with the sun. She peers into Frank's bedroom, and his door's open, but the bed is made and he's not there. But she hears the refrigerator. When she goes into the kitchen, Frank is there and he says good morning, and he's saying like, what's all this about? Because he's looking at the dementia-proof locks that are on all the things that Leia had put in. And she's like, oh, it's just a safety precaution against making, He's like, against making breakfast? That seems silly. And so she's like, well, what are you looking for? He's like, a knife. Why? She's like, the butter isn't going to spread itself now, is it? And it's like nice little clever stuff. And she's like, well, she manages to open the unlocked door, and she hands him a metal spoon. She's like, this will have to do. And Frank kind of like rolls his eyes and just starts spooning butter, which that's what we had. We had spoons, and we had plastic knives that they couldn't really cut butter because they didn't have any like edging to it. It was just kind of like a rounded edge, but you could scrape it across and peel off shades of butter, and then when the toast was hot, you could spread it over quite easily. But it's just so that you couldn't stab anyone with it and do any harm to them.
Right. And sometimes with dementia too, it's not about doing harm to anybody else either. It's about doing harm to yourself.
Right.
Cutting, slips, and stabbing yourself. All kinds of different reasons to not have sharp, pointy objects like normal scissors or even blunted scissors are dangerous around someone with dementia.
Safety scissors too, because they still can cut despite what a lot of people claim.
Right.
But this was an interesting scene because he's making breakfast. He puts bread in the toaster, and Campbell is now texting Leia saying, "You got to push really hard today." And Leia's kind of, getting distracted by her phone, and Frank is noticing that she's on her phone, and he's Frank then has this little intense moment where he's like, "I'm trying to figure out what you're doing here." And then Leia says, "Well, I'm your nurse. I'm here to help you." He's like, "Are you sure about that?" And he lets that hang for a beat before he then starts chuckling. He says, "I'm just pulling your leg. It took me a sec when you first walked in, but I remember you now." And I thought that was kind of creepy.
Yes. Yes.
And what it's interesting is like they're having this nice conversation, and he's just he's giving her some questions like, "How long have you been doing this?" And she's like, "Oh, since I graduated school, so 4 years." How many patients have you had? "Well, in terms of live-in patients, you're only my second." And Frank does this classical things like, "Is that right? Just and one other old fart before me." Leia nods, and then Frank says, "Well, how's she doing? She's still kicking." And I thought it was interesting that Frank used that pronoun. It's like, how is she doing? Still kicking.
Yeah. Yep. That was thing I noticed too was the gender.
Yeah, because like, how would he know if it was a man or a woman for the previous one? And I thought this was really clever because it reaffirms that the Google search that Frank did earlier, it was Frank doing it, and he probably found something, maybe a newspaper article or something on her LinkedIn. Like, who knows? But whatever it was that he knows more about her than he's letting on. And so the toast pops up, and Frank goes to grab it, and then Campbell is constantly texting her saying, "Find a way to bring up Sarah Richer, who is the previous nurse." He wants to know how she reacts. And while she's on her phone texting back, Frank can't get the bread out of the toaster, so he uses the metal spoon resting on the counter and shoves it directly into the toaster and gets zapped, like hard electrocuted from that. So he must have had a very old toaster.
Yeah, it didn't have the auto kill on it. Yeah.
Yeah, because as soon as the toaster pops up, the circuit's broken. You're not getting any current through that. So you had to have something that's from many decades ago.
That also leads into something I want to talk about as we get towards later on. How much of it, and I don't want to give anything away, but was it an act?
That's a good question,
because,
right?
you saw he's a burly guy. He obviously had worked with his hands. Someone like me, because I'm stupid, will do electricity around the house without turning off the breakers, and I get shocked all the time.
Oh my gosh.
I do, and it's probably half the reason why I'm stupid. But but there's also been times when I was a kid, my dad, he's old. He was old school. He was much older when they adopted me and trained me to be tough. There's something on a campfire, and I remember this as a kid. We had gone out and we had roasted kids around were sitting there nervous about it. My dad says, my son could do it, show him. And it was one of those guilt trips that an old man does it. So I had to reach in there and grab it, and dang, it was hot, but I did it. So this old guy obviously has a lot of history with being as big or burly as he is. Was this a show or was this actual? That's a debate I have even at the end of the story. How much was cognitive and how much was dementia?
Yeah, if this guy is the criminal that Campbell suspects, and he
Right.
is trying to maintain dementia, he might be crazy enough to injure himself deliberately to sell the idea.
Right. And it's not even that big of an injury, but still, it looks horrific.
Yeah. I mean, no, I think the other part too is also, and some patients do this. They really do like to push their caregiver to see how
Yes.
strong of a caregiver
Yes,
they're going
that's
to be.
true. That's very true.
So,
Very true.
so in this case here, like Leia, this part was interesting because this beat shows that Leia still can be distracted from her job, especially when she's stressed out. And she's been distracted by Campbell, who's berating her through text to like bring up the old nurse, push him harder. We need to find out now if he's faking or not. And as immediately as this is happening, Frank electrocutes himself with a spoon and a toaster. And Leah, puts down her phone, goes into nurse's mode, takes a look at his fingers, runs it under modest temperature water because you don't want to do cold and you don't want to do hot. You want to make it nice and balanced so that you're disinfecting it. And she's like, you got to keep your hand here for at least 15 minutes. And then we cut to a half hour later where, she's applying Vaseline to the charred fingers, drying them out, and then bandaging him up, and says, okay, we got to keep this dry for today. And then Maeve shows up with groceries. And
Right.
the first thing she says is like, "Oh, sorry, I should have called first, but I didn't want to get I didn't want the frozen stuff to start melt." And Leia doesn't give it much register. And then all of a sudden she notices Frank's bandage. She's like, "Oh, what happened there, mister?" And of course Leia's like, "Well, we had a little accident. I should have been watching him more closely." And Maeve is just really like endearing, saying, "Well, you can't catch everything, and that's all that matters is that he's better on the mend." And I was like, well, that's an interesting take, to be so forgiving for a nurse on her second day,
Right.
especially if you're this neighbor that cares enough about Frank that you're bringing him food, and you have keys to his house apparently, unless the door was unlocked. We don't know, but she walked right in as if as she's done it a million times before, and then they have the three of them. They're just watching like NCIS, and while Frank starts kind of like nodding off.
I think I'm having a little bit of connection issues, so if I cut in and out, I'm sorry. That's
Yeah, no worries. Yeah,
it's staying it's strong for the most part, but every once in a while I see a little circle. I'm just oh dang it! So at least I'm still here. Don't want to be kicked off and being a bad substitute host.
Oh no, I'm not. I won't kick you off. Hey, listen, if internet's messing around, that happens from time to time. But we'll keep an eye on it, see how it goes. But yeah, like now we get this like really solid scene between Maeve and Leia. And Maeve, we get a little bit of like, okay, Frank has passed out, for his nap time. And Maeve and Leia start talking, and Maeve really reveals that, her and her husband had a kid. The kid got sick. We had a live-in nurse, and, the child's passed away at 10 from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And Maeve talks about how, but those 10 years were the best years of her life, but unfortunately her husband struggled to stay together and couldn't have another kid, and so they kind of drifted apart. And she moved out, and now she's just kind of taking care of Frank, and we get this endearing story. When Maeve tries to probe a little bit with Leia, she just kind of says, "Yeah, I was a nurse, and then now I found my way over here. It's a nice change, and I'm hoping to do more of this, for the future."
Right.
And so I mean, it's kind of like weird. Like Maeve even talks about how she was like weaning herself off of antidepressants. She was always wary about using drugs. And I thought what was kind of interesting is she's like, yeah, we've come a long way from electroshock therapy and scrambling brains with ice picks. And I'm like, that's an interesting phrase. And then something like that comes back later in the script.
Right. No, there's a lot I want to get into on about that when we get to it. But that was the first thing that stunned me is that was rare, even back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
It's still rare for the electroshock. And there's some morons that are talking about doing some type of chemical lobotomies again. And I'm thinking, you guys didn't learn the first time, but always it was very, very rare. So that to me, hearing her say that, the suspicion, like I said, when we first were introduced to her,
Mm-hmm.
I thought, something's off. And then for her to say that, I'm going down the rabbit hole thinking, yeah, she's saying all the right things, but she's not saying the right things. My bells and whistles are going off in my head. You know what? She makes me nervous.
Yeah, especially when Leigh brings up the previous nurse, because Maeve's like, well, what did they tell you before you came here? And she's like, oh, that the nurse went missing and they never found her, and I guess the police thought Frank was responsible. And then Maeve goes into this really defensive story, saying like, oh, the police, we don't know where she was going, but when she never came back, and Frank doesn't know much, but he called 911 because he was scared. And the police came in here like they were the cavalry, and they broke down his door and they dragged him out of his house, and he was terrified and his heart breaking, and he was crying for his mom like a child, and they cuffed him, and it was not a well done investigation. And then when he finally came back, he kind of went back to his old thing because it was so traumatic to him. And so of course, once that's all done and Leia like goes inside and Maeve goes home, Campbell like calls her on the phone, and he's like, don't listen to what Maeve said, it's all BS. And he's like, the whole thing is wrong. And so when Leia's like, well, so Frank didn't call the police, and he's like, guilty people make the first call all the time. It's called diverting suspicion. and then, of course, Leia's challenging him, saying, like, you found real evidence, right? Like, you didn't just drag the old man out. And he's like, yes, we found real evidence. And they're like traces of Sarah Richter's blood in his home. And to me, I'm thinking, like, well, if you found traces of the victim's blood in the home, that should still warrant a more deeper investigation. And you shouldn't be using a civilian in this situation to gather more information. But apparently they are, so you have another red flag on Campbell's side. Like, who do we believe? Do we believe Campbell or do we believe Maeve? Like, Maeve is weird, but she's still endearing, so you can almost forgive the weirdness. But Campbell, like, we have like a stacking set of doubt growing with this character.
Right. And every time you see him, he's been drinking a little bit more. He's still in the same stinky clothes.
Yep.
Getting more and more agitated and nervous. So yeah, he was unstable in a lot of ways, and his story became less and less believable, and he was pushing her too hard. So yeah.
Yeah, like he's got way more urgency on his hands than Leah is prepared for. And even through this phone call, he's saying, like, no, this is what really happens. I need you to stay focused. And he sends her a selfie of Sarah that she took in front of the mirror, and she's in a skin-tight gray cocktail dress with, like, butterfly pattern on the collar. And Campbell's like, she texted this photo to a friend the next night she disappeared. You see where she is? Like, it's in the hallway by the bathroom. He's like, yep. So I want you to go back in there, find a way to ask him about, the nurse, show him the picture. And I have this note here where I'm writing down, like, what if Campbell's the guy that's responsible for this woman missing, and he is created Frank as a patsy to take the light off of him? Because there's a lot of creative character play going on at this point, and there's clearly some sort of like double blind being done here with these characters. And I'm thinking, okay, so let's explore the possibilities of like where this could go. Could Campbell really be the villain, and is he using using Leah to make this old man a suspect, because maybe he's thinking, well, he's in his 70s, he doesn't have a whole lot of years ahead of him, so even if they do convict him, they'll go easy on him, and it's almost like a crime has been solved, it's been painted onto the back of an innocent old man who the state isn't going to do much with afterwards, and then the real culprit has the rest of their lives ahead of them without any worry. And I was wondering, could that be the twist?
That's just it, because the author did very, very well at creating both a plausible cause and a believable excuse that they could be or couldn't be. All three of the main characters, not Leah, but Maeve, Frank, and Campbell,
Right.
all three of them had parts of their story that you could think of that would implicate them to being guilty, but they also had real strengths that said no, they can't be. So it was a good play. It
It,
was a very good play.
I mean, there's nothing more entertaining, especially when you're in a thriller or a mystery, where you can play with the audience's emotions and levels of doubt without making
Hmm.
them lose interest in the story. I love those types of things because it keeps you engaged. It puts you on the edge of your seat, which is exactly what you want to do in a thriller of this type, where you want to figure out, okay, you feel like you're in Leia's position. And you're trying to figure out, like, okay, who's the one? I mean, you can't trust all three of these people. You can't trust Frank because possible dementia or even possible faking it. You have a
Right.
hard time trusting Maeve because she's a little too nosy and also a little too revealing of some of her own
Right.
past. And then Campbell is a guy who it's only him as a police officer coordinating with Leah for an investigation where you think there'd probably be maybe another cop checking in. It'd be on shifts. It's a team. It's an operation. Have a lot more formalities to it, and it just feels, it feels like something is wrong. And I like this because it's really making us care about Leah and what's going to happen to her if this all goes south.
Right. And another thing that got against Campbell is when he had her sign the one party consent stuff, you don't need that for court.
No,
You
you don't.
just give your testimony. And if it was in court and they saw her putting up the cameras, consent is assumed
Yes.
without any doubt. So that made him fishy as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like he's bringing in paperwork to make it seem like it's far more above board than it actually is.
Right. Right.
And so this was all pretty interesting. But one thing I did like, and it is again, this writer, Jake Moses, did his research because Leia is now thinking, well, how can I make a plausible reason to get Frank to look at this selfie of his previous nurse? And she finds family photos all around the house and an album. And she brings it to Frank. She's like, let's play another game. I'm going to show you these photos, and you just tell me what you remember about them. And we'll do it to music. And so they put on, what is it, Unforgettable by Nat King Cole. And
Yes.
I mean, a little on the nose there, but it's still kind of appropriate. and so, yeah, Frank just starts going through the photos, and Frank talks about how, like, yeah, he used to work in construction as a contractor. He renovated this place because his father built it with his bare hands. He talks a little bit about how his father passed away when he was young, and it was just him and his mom. And then shows the photo of Sarah, and he's like, "Do you know who this is?" And then we have this great description where as soon as Frank sees the image, all emotions seem to leave his face. His pupils dilate, and for a split second, we see a shift in his demeanor. The same sort of shift we saw in the office in the office camera footage the night before. I forgot about that. When Leah is telling Campbell that she was Googled, he looks at the footage at that time, and as soon as Leah leaves the office where Frank is there playing solitaire, the screen changes, and then instead of Frank being hunched over, he sits up straight like he's alert, and then he just starts typing away. And while they can't see exactly what's on the screen, it's reasonable to presume that he was Googling Leah.
Right. Right. It was very cognitive, very deliberately savvy that he was able to do that instead of just playing his solitaire. And the thing too that got to me, and this is coming from the doctor aspect of me, for someone to dilate their eyes like that, that isn't anything that can be deliberately done or done through emotion.
No, it's about light,
Normally.
really.
Right, right. But if there was real dementia, that could actually happen. So
Because you're talking about, like,
it,
say, a serotonin imbalance or something of nature that's stimulating. Yeah.
right. So that there started throwing, the
More questions. Yeah.
it's left, well, it's like I said, I don't want to give anything away, but the ambiguity of the condition of Frank when we get closer towards the end of his mental ability or inability, it puts more weight on it. And I really found that amusing because normally, in most circumstances, that just like you said, it's something for light. It's a thing you can check for concussions. You can see whether or not someone's dead.
Hmm.
But for that to happen with memory impulses, that I was really intrigued with it. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought that was something like wasn't expecting it. It's like, okay, that's an interesting detail, because then you're looking at, again, well, pupils dilate through light or cognitive issues, such as as you mentioned, a concussion or drugs or chemical stimulation like a boost of adrenaline or serotonin or all the other weird things that our body produces through our mind. Heck, even hormones can actually cause your pupils to dilate
Right.
at the right time. Um, but he says, like, oh, I don't recognize her, doesn't ring a bell, but he does say, like, well, she's beautiful, very beautiful, but I'm sorry, I'm still drawing a blank. And Leia just kind of, okay, lets that set, and she ends up, making ham sandwiches for lunch, and she ends up hearing a noise down the hall and heads into Frank's bedroom. And what has he done? Well, he has punched through the window, and he's got broken glass in his hand. And that I thought was pretty interesting too, because that's a bit of self-harm and anger, and then complete lack of recollection of the harm and anger. Just all of a sudden, he's looking at his hand and he's got glass shards in there. And what happens now? Leia has now gone into nurse mode, dabbing alcohol, getting tweezers, pulling out the shards of glass, bandaging him up, basically saying to later on to Campbell that he needs stitches and we need to take him to a hospital. And Campbell's like, nope, you're the nurse, you're there, you got to take care of it. But we start getting a pattern here. Every time Leia brings up something that gets close to the previous nurse, Frank does something that eventually injures himself.
Right.
And I'm like, that's interesting. That's happened twice now. Will it happen a third? We don't know yet. We're not there in the script, but it's like we're starting to establish a pattern.
No, and yeah, that pattern to me was pretty obvious. The aspect of self-harm really hit me then, because with the dilated eyes, this incident, at that point, I knew to some degree Frank's a liar.
Yeah.
It wasn't just dementia. Now, granted, there could be, that could not be, like I said,
Very
the
mild
dilating
stage
of
or something.
eyes.
Yeah.
Right. But he is a liar. So now more suspicion goes on to him and less on to the other characters. It's that little tennis match. Who you going to believe, who you're not going to believe. The ball goes in the court really well.
Yeah, and shortly after his hand is bandaged up, he's nudges the corner of his nightstand by his bed, and he notices that it wobbles.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, no, this is not right. And Leia's like, well, it's fine to me. He's like, nope, it's not. I built it, but the leg needs to be filed down. And she's like, well, we don't just do a quick fix. We can put something under the other legs. And he's like, no, that means a quick fix just means it's still broken. I'm like, that is a very Carpenter thing to say. Like my dad's stepfather used to say that a couple times.
Yeah, but here's the other thing too. Why didn't he catch that earlier?
Exactly,
Why is
right?
so he's, bells and whistles are going, well, I thought it was Maeve. Now we're back to him. And what's wrong with Campbell? So it was good. It was really good.
It was. And so what's interesting is that Frank picks up the nightstand like it's nothing, which makes you go, oh, he's still got some strength to him for a 70-year-old. So it's like, that's interesting. And he heads straight down the hall towards the door to the garage. And there's, of course, the dementia lock on there. And he's making an argument. It's like, I've been using these tools for 50 years. I'll be fine. And she's trying to say, not today. And he's like, come on. I built this house. I used to build houses with my bare hands. I'm tired of hearing what I can't do. My hands work just fine. And darn it, I'd like to use them while I still can.
There's one more thing too, where he said he's been building houses. He made the mention, my father built this house,
Yeah.
and I worked on this house.
Yep.
That was a little thing that, you know what, we can't talk about that, but that was important there too.
That was a nice setup. And then of course we go into the garage. She's empathetic, lets him go into the garage, turns on the light, and you've got dozens of sharp tools, saws, hammers, drills, hatchets. The whole thing, the whole walls are just covered with them. And you got
Yep.
an electric buzz saw on a workbench. And Frank picks up this file, this old rusted file, and Leia offers to try and do it herself, but he swings around so quickly that the chisel that he's in his hand is almost cuts her at her throat. And she freaks out, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't expect you to sneak up on me like that." And she's like, "Let's just be a little more careful." And so he takes a seat at the workbench. He starts filing down the leg, but is clearly not doing anything. And even though he's working away on it, and he's strong, he doesn't have the strength to just fix it in this area. So he then looks at the buzzsaw, and his eyes widen, and he just kind of looks like he's staring off at his reflection, just lost in it. And of course, Leia's like, "Oh, do you remember something? Is it Sarah?" And he's like, "No, it's my father. He used to work in here every night." And then he kind of gives us this really fractured story about how his dad came in here after his mom said that she was going to leave him, and he ended up taking his own life.
Right.
And that he saw that as a young boy because he heard the noise from his bedroom. And he just kind of like breaks down, and of course Leia, as the good nurse, just kind of holds him and embraces him and lets him know, like, okay, we're sorry. And then he's like, they're just so fragile. And Leia asks, well, what are so fragile? And he's like, families. And you're like, okay, he's showing some humanity again, but like this is
That
still
was
creepy.
important. That was very important.
Yeah.
That he said families.
Oh yeah, it was very important because while he was like dozing off and everything, like this, he's depressing the button on the buzzsaw power switch, so it's like worse to life, and it's like just ripping through the air, and nobody's near it, but it's really disconcerting that he's just leaving this on, and it
Right.
could cause. I mean, there's a guard on it, but it could still cause damage because if you can slip under the guard, you're injured. And she's trying to have him like take off the button and stuff, but he's just kind of reminiscing. And then when he finally breaks down, that's when he releases the button. The buzzsaw turns off, and and he just falls into her embrace and talks about how fragile families are. And so
Now,
she
I
puts him.
got a question for
Yeah.
you because I can't remember where it was at, but I know that Maeve said the same thing, that families were fragile.
Mhm.
And was that earlier on when she talked about her daughter passing away?
Yeah, I think Maeve said that as well. Um,
Because I know she said it, but I'm just trying to remember. I think
I don't
that's
think
at
she
the
used the
point
word
where it was.
fragile though, but she did something about families.
Right.
Yeah.
Either way, it was the similarities between the two. It was one of those things where we're bouncing in the court back and forth, keep playing with who's doing what.
Yeah, so Maeve says something like to understand that families come in all shapes and sizes, and new families, well, they can be a beautiful thing. Like that's what Maeve says. And then we get, families can be, a tragic thing. But Maeve says that after Frank says that. She hasn't said that beforehand. She just focused more on the daughter and that everything was broke up.
Okay.
But
Well,
yeah.
that was my question.
Yeah, no, but but there's that more connection. Like there's something else going on between Frank and Maeve besides them being neighbors. And we learned that just in the next, basically on day 3, because this is now the end of the day 2. She puts Frank to bed. Campbell texts her and says, "Get over here right now." And so Leia, she puts on a windbreaker and she heads out towards the house. And Maeve is, and it's not evening yet. It's like the afternoon nap type of thing. So we're rounding up on day 2. And as she's heading out, Maeve is outside working on the front porch with her electric drill again. And Leia, and she's like, "Hey neighbor, how you doing?" And Leia's like, "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just going for a walk." And
Mm-hmm.
heads over to Campbell's cabin. And this is where Leia noticed, like, there's a pill bottle, there's the couple of whiskey bottles that are empty, and Campbell just says, "I'm pausing the rest of your payments." And Leia's like, "Whoa, what's that's not our deal. What's going on?" He's like, "Well, you're not. I don't have the results I need. You're taking too long. I asked you to help me prove that he's guilty, and that's not here." And he's like saying, like, it's been 30 hours, and as far as we know, all we got is a Google search that he did of you, and you're not doing what I need. And of course, Leia's defensive. She's like, "I'm a nurse. I'm supposed to help him." She's like, "Do you want me to waterboard him or something?" And this is where we get some dark humor, where Campbell says that would surely speed things up, I presume, and she's just like, "I don't know what's going on with you. Like, I'm the one that's doing all the detective work." And Campbell's explaining, like, "Oh, really? Okay. Well, how did he do it? What weapons did he use? Where did he bury the body?" And Leah's like, "Well, I don't know." It's like, "Well, then you're not. Then if you don't know, then you're not convinced. Then we're never gonna nail this guy for what I suspect he's responsible for." And this is where things really go onto a turn. And this isn't even like in spoiler territory yet, but
She notices what the prescription is.
yes. Oh wait, did we get to that part here? Did we get to him dropping the prescription
Yeah,
stuff?
I thought that was at this part.
I think it's at
this part.
this part, or I think it's actually the next part, because there's one more scene with him. But this part here, like, she sees the pill bottles, but she doesn't get the description. But this is the part where Campbell pulls out an evidence bag, and inside is a gray cocktail dress covered in blood. And basically Campbell's saying, like, I found this in the vent at his house. And already a red flag's going up. It's like, if you found that on his property, why isn't he behind bars, or excuse me, at least being held for interrogation, if you found literally a bloody dress in his air conditioning vent? And even he tries to
DNA all over it.
There's DNA all over it, and apparently he's saying, like, "Well, I came about it through not exactly proper methods." And this is where you get even more thing, where he's like, "I want you to go put it back in the vent." And I'm like, okay, that's planting evidence. So Campbell is really messing around here. It's like, you can't trust them. And she's like, "Well, what are you talking about? I can't do that." He's like, "Frank doesn't know that I found this, and you're going to act like you found it." And she is just, wondering, like, how am I supposed to do that? He's like, "Well, hide it in your jacket, put it back in the vent when he's not looking, and then stumble upon it or something. And when you show it to him, we'll get a real reaction." And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. There's security cameras in this house that she planted there. Aren't they not going to capture her putting this thing in the vent, or staging this revelation of sorts? And isn't that going to make things really suspect when it comes to, a possible trial? Because you've got video footage of a civilian planting evidence to implicate this man into a crime that he may or may not have committed. It's like, my mind is just spinning, thinking all the reasons why this wouldn't work. And completely understanding to Leia, who is, a nurse and probably doesn't read as many police stories or follow up on those types of things as possible, and is just kind of feeling like, I need to cooperate because I need the money. This cop is, appears to be above board as far as she knows with police officers, because, again, the vast majority of people do not deal with police officers every day. So they don't always know everything. They have to learn the legal code, penal code, and the legal system and whatnot on their own. But yeah, that's where she's like, okay, this is not going to be an easy thing. And Campbell goes into a more supportive tone, and he's like, "Listen, I couldn't find what happened to that little girl. You screwed up with Rose. But if this guy is taking advantage of people that are like Rose to do harm to other people, we got to stop him. And even though that won't bring Rose back, it won't bring the kid back, it'll at least put us going in the right direction of getting one more creep, out of the system or out of society."
Right.
And so Leia kind of, that hits the right points for Leia, and so she agrees. She heads back to the home, and they decide, and basically just kind of go about their day. Leia and Frank are at the kitchen table playing a game of Mancala, clacking marbles together, and then all of a sudden
she had rigged the
thermostat to go down to 60 degrees, and Frank is like, "Oh, did you turn the heat down?" She's like, "I thought it was actually I turned it up, and I wonder why it's not coming through." And he starts to head into the hallway, and she's like, "What are you gonna do?" It's like, "I'm gonna fix the damn thing." He's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll check it out." And so Frank goes back to the table, and that's where Leia digs through her things, gets the blood-stained gray dress, goes into Frank's bedroom, puts it unscrews part of the ceiling vent, drops the dress on the bed. Frank's remarking how it doesn't get any warmer, and then she's like, "I found the problem, just one sec," and asks Frank to come inside. And Frank heads into the bedroom, and he sees the bloody dress on his bed, and Frank turns to stone, and he glares at Leia, and he's asking her, like, "What did you do?" And she's like, "Nothing. I opened the vent, and heat wasn't getting out, and this fell out." And he's like, "This fell out of my vent?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "That's not possible." And then she says, "It looks a lot like Sarah's dress, doesn't it, from the one in the picture?" And it's like, "It's covered in blood, Frank. Did something happen?" And Frank's like, "I don't know. What do you think you're doing? But I've had enough of this. It's time you leave." And she's trying to talk it out, and she's like trying to say, like, if there's an accident or something, I'm sure it was and it just, he starts exploding. And freaking out and telling her to get out of his house, and Leia is trying to contact Campbell, and things are not going well, and she ends up looking at the dress, and then also looks at the photo, and we get something even more suspicious, which is that in the photo, the dress has these butterflies on the collar, and the dress that was thrown at her by Frank with all the blood on it has no butterflies on the collar, so it's not the right dress. And
fake evidence or something.
It's something else, and I'm like, "Oh, this is great. This is now affirming the suspicion that, it's not enough that Campbell asked Leia to plant evidence. Like, we now know it's legitimately not pertaining to Sarah because the dress doesn't match that part. So now there's more there's more suspicion going on to Campbell. And this was pretty cool because Frank, she manages to get back in because what happened here? He lacerated his hand again. I'm trying to remember. Let me go through the script really quick. He breaks another window again. And blood is so he hurts his hand again, and he has to she has to mend him all over. And this is where she starts telling Campbell that she needs more support, and everything is kind of not working out too well. So while Frank kind of has a relapse of sorts where he kind of forgets what's going on, and Leia is able to be there, she puts him to bed. She goes back to the computer, and she starts trying to search for Detective Campbell and doesn't find anything. And so he ends up searching for Chloe Burke, and she finds an old article that the lead detective was removed from the missing persons case, and that the detective's name was named Roland Douglas Campbell, and that he's been recently suspended for tampering with evidence. And
not a good guy.
He's not a good guy. And so she is really upset. She apologizes to Frank, who's feigning. I think we're feigning, or maybe he isn't. It's like, I don't understand you why you'd want to hurt me or anything. And she's like, "No, it's not that." She really reveals that, I had a friend. She was a little older. She was someone I could talk to about anything. And sometimes she would get confused and scared, and I was supposed to be her that light to protect her, and I wasn't, and I let her get hurt, and I won't let that happen ever again, not to you, not to anyone. She heads over to Campbell's place, and this is where we find out the medication. She finds out that, Campbell is fired, And Campbell's like, well, those idiots are just about politics than real justice. I was the only one who cared about giving Sarah's family the closure they deserved. I'll never apologize for that. He talks about how like civilians don't need consent or a warrant, especially when you are the single party that's recording everything. And then that's where the medication falls out, and that's what's called it's erdafitinib, something like that.
Yeah,
Which is for cancer.
it's a cancer medication, and there are a dime a dozen of different names for different ones, and who wants to prescribe what. So, if you didn't recognize it, that's okay. But even still, it was a sign that he is not well, and the alcohol drinking on everything was his painkiller, and it wasn't because he was an alcoholic. He was suffering hard.
Yeah. He basically says he has pancreatic cancer and not much time left, and before he passes on, he needs to know, like, what happened. And so he then divulges the details of the Chloe Burke case. He's like, when she went missing all those years ago, you know who happened to be passing through town? And that happened to be Frank. And they couldn't find anything concrete, so they had to let him walk. But now another girl vanishes, and once again, he's in the middle of it. Can't be a coincidence. He's convinced that something is up there. And he's basically said, like I told you, Sarah never left his neighborhood, right? Well, as far as we can tell, neither did Frank. And if he did this, her body is probably still somewhere on his property. So when he's sleeping tonight, you're going to look through every inch of his house until we find it. And she's like, well, I don't know where to look. He's like, I'll take you home. Once this is done, I'll take you home, but I'll help you search the house so that we can find, if there's a body on the property, we will find it. And this is how we end day 2, where she's, she heads back home. She goes to bed. Morning is here. And she basically tells Frank, like, hey, my schedule shifted, so a new nurse will be here tomorrow. But I was thinking we can make, the most of it. I'll cook whatever you want for breakfast. And then after breakfast, you can pick what we do for the rest of the day. And how does that sound? And he's like, that's a deal. And this is where we get this cool setup where after she makes breakfast, she loads the dishwasher. One of it has like a chef's knife inside. And they're watching NCIS, and he's, starting to fall asleep, and he wants to stay up for the next 15 minutes before the show ends. And as, she goes to the washroom, and she sends Campbell a message saying, yep, he's about to go to sleep, but Campbell doesn't reply. And he's like, where do you want me to look first? And no reply. And as she gets into the kitchen, the dishwasher door is now hanging wide open, and the large chef knife is missing, and Frank is kind of stalking her now, and all she has for defense is a can of pepper spray, and so we have this intense scene where he's kind of chasing her around the house, and she's freaking out. He's not saying anything, which makes it even like weirder, like, because we don't know. It's like, did he snap? Does he think he's got a home invasion? Like, there's nothing telegraphing what's going on in his head other than his actions of that. He's like kind of like going after, he's just like a zombie of sorts, just thrusting this kitchen knife at her and swiping at her. And it's pretty intense scene because we get that moment that we were talking about earlier of like, the burst of adrenaline, the burst of strength that an elderly person can have, and now we're seeing it in full force right here.
Yeah, I know it's not untypical. A lot of people, and it's a sad thing, but a lot of people, you get so used to seeing somebody as you grow old together, if it's a husband and wife or a child and father, what have you, and then you don't realize the true state of dementia where something like this can come out. And a lot of times it shocks people that they see the actual manifestation, but it's far along in the process. They didn't catch up all the subtle signs, so it can be quite a shock that all of a sudden they are violent when you missed all the details all along. And so this was, it seemed very poignant, right on point.
Yeah, and it worked really well for the drama and for the intensity. I love the fact that like she does manage to get out of the house just barely by the skin of her teeth, and she makes a beeline for Campbell's rental. And
Mm-hmm.
when she gets inside, she sees Campbell hunched over the laptop, and when she gets closer, his neck has been slit open, and he's dead. And now you're like, oh great! Even if Campbell's slightly untrustworthy, he was the only adversary to Frank, and now Leah has no one. So she quickly rushes to Maeve's place and bangs on the door, and Maeve opens up and lets her in. It's like, hey, what's wrong? And she's like, yeah, Frank, he attacked me with a kitchen knife, and she's all panicked, and Maeve is here like, okay, let's calm down, let's get you all set. I'll make you some tea. She boils some hot water. She's sitting in the kitchen, and this is where things get really weird because we now learn that Maeve is a hoarder, and
Oh yeah.
and it is bad. Like there are cockroaches and flies and things everywhere. And Leia's, as she's calming down, she's now registering everything around here, and and then and then she's about to
She
dial.
looks at the trash.
Yeah, she's about to dial 911, and when all of a sudden Maeve pulls a gun on Leah and says that everything's going to be okay, but you got to put down the phone and take a seat and don't make me ask twice because you're home now and you're going to be my kid. And
Well,
that
didn't she notice in the you may have to correct me on this, but I thought the reason why she finally decided to dial 911 crash and she saw the caller of a dress that had the butterflies on it.
yes, it was out of so basically there was something in the trash bag sticking out, and she gets a better look. She loosened the bag and pulls out this plastic that pulls apart the plastic, and inside is the gray silk material like a young woman's dress with butterfly patches on it. And that is when she starts calling, and that's when Maeve pulls the pistol on her.
Right.
And this is not the big twist of the script, but it's like this is where our spoiler cutoff is because Maeve is the one that has done something to the previous nurse. And
Right. And it's a horrible place to cut off because there's so much left in the script, but you kind of have to.
like
And
because this is the line because everything that follows through with it is so juicy, so good.
yes, yes. And it really accelerates from here on out too.
Yeah, it really does. Like I mean, I love the fact that it's done so passively, but really like where we're ending it here is Maeve is still longing the loss of her daughter,
Hmm.
and we are getting story beats that suggest that the previous nurse Sarah, Maeve preyed on her to replace her lost child. And now when that didn't take for whatever reasons, whatever happened, now she's using Leah to fill that void here. And now we're left wondering, okay, well, so this is the neighbor. Was she doing something that got the police on the attention of Frank so that she could kind of continue on with whatever's going on? Because she's literally living in a house like just stacks of newspaper, garbage, rodents and critters everywhere. I mean, it's a wonder she doesn't have like physical signs of poisoning or scurvy or whatever going on in Maeve. Because when you see her out and about, she looks fairly normal, cleanly dressed, but the inside of her home is it's a crime scene of sorts. I mean,
Right.
so
Right.
it's one heck of an interesting cutoff, but I will say this: like the final act from this moment on, and the way that they end the script, it's real. It's basically like the stuff of classic '80s suspense thrillers, like
Oh yeah.
Silence of the
Oh yeah.
Lambs or uh oh gosh what is it? Body Heat, like without some of the sexual undertones, of course, but like just some really creepy stuff in here. And then the other part too is that it all makes sense at the end. Like you don't feel like you're missing any further details. Like everything gets nicely addressed.
Right. And I don't want to spoil anything, but I do want to talk healthcare stuff
Sure.
because I mentioned that I'd bring it up. When Maeve originally had talked about lobotomies and electroshock therapy and that type of thing, again, if you want to know why I'm bringing this up, you're going to have to get on Patreon and look at the script for yourself, or find it and read it. But this is where those of you who read it will know why I'm bringing it up. And they're the only reasonable ways to get a type of results. There was some of you may have known Jeffrey Dahmer had tried to do it to some of his victims, and it didn't work. There's only two ways to do it, and both of them are pretty dramatic and wouldn't quite get the results that would be expected. The first one is, and I'm going to be gross, where they think of a thin little tiny blade, about maybe half the width of a pencil, but it's very thin, and they would shove it in the corner of the eye closest to the nose, smack it in, and then it would go in several inches, and then they slice up and down just a little bit to separate the two halves of the brain, which prevents certain types of communication between it and makes the person quite docile. The other way is to be in the temple. And you go from the side of the temple above where the eye nerve, I won't get too technical, is, but the basic idea is you put the blade in there and you separate the frontal half, the reasoning half, with the primitive reflexive brain, and it makes them docile. Any other place would cause undesirable results. But even to begin with, those were just horrifically evil things that people did. And all in the name of what they call...
Yeah, it was an effort to...
Enough for me about it.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, these were just demented people looking to experiment with the helpless. And I will stand on that even now for the people who are trying to do it with chemical. But that's just me. But either way, I figure for those of you who are going to read the script, it will make sense why I bring it up and why I find difficulty with something that is in there. But it's just a minor thing. It is fascinating to me coming from a healthcare aspect. And my basic bread and butter is neurology. That's what my profession dealt with almost exclusively. Otherwise, but no, I'm a nerve doctor. And this really fascinated me. And that's why I love this story. Anyway, go ahead.
No, it's the same thing. And the scarring for those operations are not the same as... So what you might see, especially from older people, is maybe they'll have some divots in their forehead or at the top of their scalp. That is not the same for what you're describing, because that is actually from an older procedure where there's swelling and blood around the brain, and they had to relieve the pressure, so they drilled through the skull just before the brain so they could prevent swelling and pressure, but they would leave these divots because they drilled like eighth of an inch holes into your skull.
Gone, yeah.
And it's not the same thing but also it was a desperate practice that was different because they didn't know how to mitigate that at that time. So that was the only way that they could prevent the person from dying when he had a traumatic head injury that caused brain swelling.
Right.
But today they actually have a counter agent that helps, and then a better way to drain it. In fact, even a relative of mine had a technical term. The colloquial term is like water on the brain.
Right.
But the technical term is far more complex, and you actually end up having to put in a small syringe at the base of the skull to try and drain that out so that it won't cause any further brain damage. And it's a very, very dangerous procedure that only very few specialists are able to do. And
right.
And I remember when this happened to this relative, and it was like, even in Canada, I was shocked that the wait list was only 4.5 weeks. Because again, this type of thing, a condition, especially in Canada, is very, very rare. You have to be very old and also have the circumstances where you get that diagnosis, which is not often in Canada. So when they got it in, the relatives erratic behavior immediately vanished because there wasn't that extra excess of chemicals screwing around with their brain. But it was so different because you take a look at all these other experiments that had happened, especially between like the early 1900s up until the 1970s, where it was really just taking advantage of people that had severe mental illness and treating them more like guinea pigs as opposed to humans.
Yeah. Yeah. It still sickens me.
Yeah. I mean, and the other part too is everything that these people quote unquote discovered were basic reasonable assumptions that other doctors could come to without having to ever damage a patient.
Right. There had been injuries over the past at least 200 years of recorded history of people having uh, shots. They could have had accidents, falls with sticks going into certain parts
Or
of the
chemical
brain,
poisoning. Yeah.
chemical poisoning, various different things. And they would know in autopsy or by actually seeing the wound which part of the brains were affected and how they responded to those. And it gave them a general idea.
Mm-hmm.
So anything else beyond that, it's exactly like you said. These were sick people taking advantage of the people who couldn't complain about it. And some of the people could complain about it, but they were put into these institutions under false pretenses, and there was some bad stuff. We're not a good people sometimes.
No, we have our flaws. I mean, there's even members of prominent families that did this to their relatives for a couple of reasons. One was image. It's like, oh, we're a very, wealthy or prominent family within society. We can't have our daughter or son acting this way, so we're going to reach out to this doctor that's going to perform an operation that's going to make them very passive and less erratic. And
Right,
that's going to be
right.
good for us. And it's like, how do you not have a heart about your child or your relative, like father or mother or sibling or something, and that you let them go through that just because you care more about how other people think than the care of of someone that's close to you, your family.
Right.
But that's just the morbid nature that that unfortunately we have in society, but also gives a lot of people an interest to kind of share these types of stories where you can show like the darker half of the human psyche and how it can affect other people. And this script really does explore that on 3 different levels all at the same time.
Right.
And it's just so well written. Well, I guess, the audience listening knows our ruling, so to speak, at the end of the day, but let's make it official. Adega, would you give Fractured a green light or a pass?
Oh, this has 2 green lights. Out of all the ones that we've done, and I've given, I think I don't know how many I've done, but most of them I've given green lights to. I know I didn't. But this one is one of the best that we've done together. I really, really enjoyed this. There's the psychological, the play on, because even in the end, you still don't know if Frank was true dementia or partial dementia or all a play. It was yeah, the author did a fantastic job. And just to read a script without spelling, and I make spelling errors, so
Oh,
forgive
dude.
me. But this, yeah, this needs to be a movie. It really does. There are so many emotional, stressful, suspenseful aspects that the script could be pulled out of, and just human nature that it could, if it's done right, be one of those ones that lasts a very long time and people study it because it's that good of a script, I believe.
Oh, it's on the level of Silence of the Lambs or Misery, in my opinion.
Yes.
Like, I agree to greenlight it as well because it's an easy location. It's a very tight cast, juicy stuff for all the actors to play with, and it's meticulously done. Like, you could tell the level of care that the writer of this script put into, that Moses put into, or sorry, Jake Moses, not the Moses, but Jake Moses put into.
Right.
Because like, he did his research. He framed everything plausible enough to take advantage of what the main character doesn't know, and also give us really fun moments of doubt with some of the other characters as well. And
Right.
that, that just made it a really entertaining script. And I like scripts that do this, that it's not superficial in any way. It's playing with layers, and there's a really great theme here about how sometimes a little bit too much empathy can compromise what is best for what you're doing and the people that you're caring for, because that's one of Leah's flaws here is she ends up forming an attachment with the person she's caring with that she'll make some exceptions to try and help with their emotional care, forgetting that help with emotional care can actually do physical harm to the person that she's caring for.
Right.
And
Right.
and I thought it's a great little lesson. So
Yeah.
before we check in with the Patreon, before we wrap it up with the show, is there any final points of interest that you want to highlight before we find out from our wonderful community if they voted for this being a green light or a pass?
Well, the dementia part, the character development, like you said, the empathy, how empathy without logic can get you in trouble. And Leia learns that she doesn't actually learn that. It's a failing. There's a little bit of legal aspects. It just hits all the big things. But I think my biggest thing is you bring these in as scripts, but if you want just a short horror story, you can read it as that as well. It's that well written.
Yeah.
So no, it's 100% on this one.
Yeah, and actually our Patreons agree. They the ones that voted overwhelmingly 100% to greenlight this script. So I say we got a great one here. One that I think definitely deserves to be higher than the top 25.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just very happy that at least 25, how many votes did this one? 16 producers that voted for this have some really great taste. And I'm really hoping that someday soon someone puts this into production and shares this with the world, because I think this is definitely the type of movie that is for those psychological criminal thrillers with a little bit of horror thrown into it. It reminds me a little bit like
we've already had one that we did together. It was I Want Your Face, or whatever the name of that was.
Yeah,
'Cause that's
yeah.
been made into a movie, and this one is better than that one. This one definitely should be made into one, and that was a good script.
Yeah, I mean, what's fascinating is that for this season alone, we're kind of running on 50-50 for good versus bad, which is actually way better odds than normally you get when you're reading a bunch of screenplays circulating around the industry. So, I mean, I've been pretty impressed, and I like this one a lot. I'm looking at myself thinking, man, if I had $1 million, I'd be like, let's make this, because we could do it for $1 million easily.
Right.
But
I would clear that, no problem at all.
Oh yeah, I mean, just make it, take it to Cannes Film Market or a couple of smaller festivals just to get some buzz, and then shop it around. And you're like, yeah, come on, let's go, let's get a distribution deal. Whether it's, I mean, ideally theatrical would be the best, because you can get some good break through some good barriers there. But even if it were to go on streaming, there's a good chance it could like chart on Netflix, because it is that interesting of a thriller. And you get a really compelling main lead to play Leah. You get someone like maybe Anthony Hopkins, because he already played a role like this recently. But you get
someone like him, yeah.
But you get someone like him who can do some. John Goodman maybe, who can do soft and angry really well. He could be,
and he's
big, yeah. So he could be good there. I think it'd be a heck of a great movie. So I'm going to keep my eye on this. Hopefully it gets produced, or at the very least, I'll see what else the writer has got under their belt in the future, and maybe we'll get lucky and they'll have something else brand new that does get released, and we'll be able to see how that pays out. Checking in with the live chat, we have a poop emoji sticker from the dead man. Thank you for that. It's always welcome, but not required. And I want to thank everyone out there for checking in with us this week to talk about Fractured by Jake Moses. This is a really good script. I highly recommend everyone go out, search for it, read it. If you're having trouble finding it, My DMs on the Twitter X's are open, so just shoot me a DM and I will hook you up with the script. As always, for Patreon members, you find out what script we're going to be reviewing every Monday for the Saturday show, and you guys get to vote on that. And I appreciate all of you guys that are voting, but I also would really love it if you guys would leave a comment. If you don't want your name said, that's quite all right. Just let us know. But we'd love to hear your comments so that we can further the conversation and get you guys a bit more involved. That way, we also have another super chat donation from the dead man who says, "Hello, Clarice." I can't do the creepy part there unless it was like
Hello, Clarice.
I could do it like John F. Kennedy, like "Hello there, Clarice" or something like that. But yes, I want to thank all you guys for listening in live. I want to thank everyone for listening on the replay. Again. Really would love all of our wonderful patrons. Thank you so much for your support. Really would appreciate if you threw in your comments there so we can get you guys involved into the show, because you guys, when I see you in other chats, when I see you in my chat, you always have some great insights, and I want to get those better integrated in for you. With that being said, Adega, where can our wonderful audience find you on the interwebs?
You find me on X at Adega _, because when I signed up it was real early and you had to have a certain amount of characters and they had to have the underscore to be able to sign in. So I'm the only Adega only. You can find me on YouTube where you can hear my latest work. It's editing process. It's the largest work I've done. I'm just finishing for tomorrow will be chapter 65. Well over 100,000 words in that. I don't know why people measure it by words, but it's a big book. And then our wonderful chat has posted pretty much how to find any of my books, and people love them, and I am grateful that they do. So yeah, but I think most importantly, you could find me here when Script asked me to come on and have a good time chatting about these things, because this one excited me. This was really fun.
This was really fun, and I did a quick check. So this was your 9th time co-hosting us.
Oh wow!
So that means the next one.
They like me. They really like me.
That's right. So that means that the next one you do, which won't be too long from now, will be number 10, which is great. You'll be in the double digits. So that'll be awesome. And yeah, you also have like a great track record too. We've got lucky with the scripts that you have done, which they're way more better than they were bad.
That must be it, because I can only recall 2 that I didn't. I mean, there's several that I didn't like, but 2 that I didn't give a green light to. Like the last one we did with the collapsing room. I hated that story, but it was great. It would make a great movie. But this one, everything about it I like. So yeah, no, my track record is pretty dang good. I think 8 we've given green lights to.
I think 8
or 7.
7, yes, because the last 2 before this one was double green light. Episode 62 was the double pass. We didn't like that one, and then the one before the end of the year of last year was also a double pass. That wasn't too good.
Yeah, that was the what is it? Penister.
Penister. The pen tester. Yeah. Penister, pen tester. That was that was a weird one.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well,
thanks again, though, Script.
Oh, please.
For not just for me, but for doing this for people's education, for the people who write the scripts, where they can hear impartial people go through what they've written. A lot of people will get an education from this, both the audience and people who write. So thank you.
Well, no, I'm happy to do this. I love talking about screenplays. I love reading them. I love writing them. This is how you learn to be a good writer, or at least better your own craft into whatever style is to your preference. And again, objective good writing, there are only a handful of things that can count, but most of it is really like subjective on a basis for it. But we got a lot of cool stuff here to try and steer everybody that's interested into the right direction if they want to pursue writing here. Asking the questions that are important to make sure that they're doing right by their stories, and also ideally right by the audience that they're trying to appeal to. And these types of discussions are fun. This is the type of stuff that happens among a lot of screenwriters in the industry. Like, we'll go to a party, we'll talk about the scripts that we read, we'll have these types of conversations, diving into them. Of course, obviously the only caveat here is the reason I'm able to do this show and not get in trouble is as I've made an agreement that I would not spoil the third act, because that's what you want the movie to be made and put into the theaters, and you want the general audience to see it and not be spoiled beforehand. So that's one of the ways I'm able to get away with this here. But it's also the best part is a lot of these writers I've never heard of before. A couple of them I have, and we've talked about that previously, but a lot of them I haven't. And then the other part too is we've got 81 examples of writers that are not just doing your boilerplate existing IP assignment stuff, Hollywood junk out there. They're really trying to play around with each different genre, from comedy to thriller to suspense to romance, even to sci-fi that we had just the other week. All really cool attempts at trying to make a really fun story. And for us, a lot of them worked, and also a lot of them didn't. And it's fun to talk about stuff like that here, especially with you and all the other co-hosts that join in, and everybody in the chat that leaves a comment, that leaves a donation. We always really appreciate that. So thank you so much for your support for this very niche show. And we'll be back again next week to talk another script. So with that being said, thank you again, Adega, for joining me this evening. And for all you guys out there, have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next week. And never forget, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.